We have lots to talk about in today's video, including the latest trade talk around the NHL. Today we're focusing on mainly some Eastern Canadian teams in the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, and the Ottawa Senators. Plus, we have the quarter-century teams announced for the Boston Bruins. We also have a big update on a potential return. Longtime NHL veteran John Klingberg looking to sign and should make a decision here soon where he's going to be heading. We have some expansion in the East Coast League, lots of injury updates, more news from the NHL waiver wire, and a fine from player safety. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. Let's get started first with news from the Department of Player Safety. In last night's game against the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings, it was a very tight checking affair, 1-0 victory for Edmonton, but there was an incident from Adrian Kempe laying a hit on Connor McDavid and gave him a slew foot, and he's been fined $5,000. I'm a little bit surprised in a way. We've a lot of slew foots have kind of led to suspensions, but I think a lot of that also depends on the player history. Kempe, for the most part, I believe has a clean record, so a fine seems justified in this case. So a fine for Kempe on that slew foot. News from the NHL waiver wire: we had 3 players on waivers yesterday. There was no claims. Everybody cleared and have been reassigned down to their American Hockey League affiliate. And for consecutive days, something that you never hear of, but we just had the incident of Penguin forward Michael Bunting being involved in a car accident. And now today we have another one with Montreal Canadian forward Emil Heineman being involved in a car accident, except as a pedestrian. Of course, they're on the road right now in Utah and Salt Lake City, and I don't know the exact details of everything that happened, but obviously as a pedestrian, he was on foot. A car hit him. He's now suffered an upper body injury and is going to be out for close to a month. It's certainly a very unfortunate set of circumstances. Heineman's been a pretty nice, pretty good season, to be honest, overall for Montreal. It's kind of been up and down the lineup, a little bit hot and cold, but still, for something like that to happen, it's not even related to hockey and something that's generally speaking avoidable. It's really unfortunate. So I'm not sure what's been going on in the world of NHL lately, but it just seems really odd. All of a sudden we have all these multiple days here with vehicle accidents impacting NHL players. Some other roster moves and injury updates around the league. The Carolina Hurricanes today did move Freddie Anderson back to IR. Now, this is not a setback. This is not an issue. This is really just a paper transaction to create roster space. So they had to recall defenseman Ty Smith as well. So don't worry about Freddie Anderson and his recovery. Nothing is impacted by that move. The Red Wings confirmed today that the defenseman Jeff Petrie will not be on their coming up road trip, but Alex Lyon is getting close to return and shouldn't be out for too much longer. The Bruins, with a series of moves today, did recall center Matt Patra, and Callahan's also been recalled, but they had to put Mark Kastelik and Charlie McAvoy both on IR. So that's certainly not good news. The Bruins have already, had their fair share of struggles as of late, as I've mentioned in recent videos. There's lots of speculation on, further moves that could be affecting the Bruins. And by point percentage, they're technically not even in a playoff spot anymore. Columbus and Ottawa would both pass them. And of course, with tonight's action, if the Sens and Jackets pick up more points, it's going to be a matter of time before they pass them point-wise as well. And then with the teams coming up behind them, which I believe some of them play tonight as well. Montreal plays Utah. I believe the Red Wings are in action. And then you've got, like I said, the Sens and the Jackets. There's 4 teams that could potentially all pass Boston within a game or two here if they don't get their act together. Now they're all clumped into that part of the standings. It's been a major fall in the standings, and the coaching change didn't really do much. We'll see what else happens, but it's not going to be easier for sure with some of these key players out injured. We've also got news today. The Vancouver Canucks are getting back Philip Hronek tonight, so he's back in the lineup. They're going to actually have a full healthy lineup with all their key players for the first time in a long time. So we'll see how things go for them. The Islanders today also recalled Matt Gatcom, I believe, or Gatcom is the name is. Not a player or prospect I'm familiar with, but he was recalled on an emergency basis. I'm not sure which one of their forwards. They're home tonight against the Ottawa Senators. I don't know who was coming out of the lineup or why he was recalled on emergency basis. And the Penguins, even though he cleared waivers a number of days ago, Jesse Puljujarvi has finally been reassigned to the AHL. Big news as well today. Of course, we know that the ECHL has expansion plans. We learned today that well-known personalities from Spit and Chicklets with Paul Bissonnette, Ryan Whitney, and their buddies Mike Grinelli and Keith Yandel, the four of them have become all part owners of the ECHL franchise. It's going to be in Greensboro, North Carolina. So they're getting into hockey ownership. Obviously, at a low level, the cost wouldn't be anything near what the NHL is, but still kind of neat in a way for them. I know the team name and logo and everything was supposed to be announced this evening. As of the time I record this video, it hasn't happened as of yet. So we'll see, but certainly interesting on that front. The NHL today announced more of the quarter century teams. Today was Boston's. The first team for the QC team for the Bruins includes some players that are going to go down, in my opinion, as some all-time greats for the franchise. The three forwards are Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, and Brad Marchand, along with defensemen Zdeno Chara and Charlie McAvoy, and of course goalie Tim Thomas. The second team has Jumbo Joe Thornton. Now, I think he would have been on the first team had he played there longer, but unfortunately that was one of the worst moves in Bruins history, in my opinion, trading Jumbo Joe very early in his career. David Pastrnak is on the second team, and Milan Lucic, which is very questionable, surprising in my opinion, especially with everything that's gone down with Lucic during his second tenure with the Bruins. And regardless of that, even if you don't want to factor in the off-ice stuff, there's a lot of players, in my opinion, that had a better run with the Bruins, and I think you could make the list fairly lengthy at that. So I'm very surprised in that front. On the blue line, you've got Torrey Krug and Dennis Seidenberg, and between the pipes, we got Tuukka Rask. Longtime NHL defenseman and currently playing over in the KHL, at least he was. Tony DeAngelo is heading back home to North America. We saw the KHL today announce that the SKA defenseman has been released from his contract and he was heading back to North America. It didn't sound like they terminated him. I think it sounded mutual, but I'm not really certain on that. The team is in turmoil. They're not doing well. They've been getting a lot of taunting and chanting at them, especially when playing in away arenas. Head coach Roman Rottenberg as well is apparently considering resigning. It's just a complete upheaval in that organization right now, and Tony's heading back. I'm not sure if he's going to attempt or get a chance to sign with another NHL club or how that's going to go. I'm not sure if he's got any bridges left that aren't burnt in that league, but we will see. Now, another veteran, as I mentioned, looking to make an NHL return soon rather than later is John Klingberg. Now, John Klingberg last appeared in the NHL with the Toronto Maple Leafs with a brief appearance last year before undergoing the hip resurfacing surgery, which is a major surgery. Of course, same type of deal we saw with Patrick Kane and a few others. I believe Puljujarvi had that surgery, and Nicholas Backstrom. Now, Backstrom, of course, was a lot older, didn't have quite the luck from the recovery that he didn't bounce back like Kane did. So we'll see. But at this point, Klingberg is feeling good and looking to make a return to the NHL. According to Darren Dreger, there's about 5 to 7 teams in the mix. But the main ones, I think he said Toronto is kind of who he's handicapping to kind of have the best odds. He last played there. He's been living in Toronto. That's where he's doing his rehab. But apparently the Ottawa Senators and Edmonton Oilers are two of those other teams that are in the mix. We know they both have been tested for their blue line depth and are considering. I don't know if we'll get to a point where it's really going to be a bidding war per se. I don't know that. I would think that any team that signs Klingberg would only want to sign him at league minimum for the rest of the season. At least that's what I would suspect. So for me, it's probably going to be a case of, what's the best fit for John Klingberg? That's probably what he's going to use to make his decision. I would think that where he's been out of the game of hockey for, almost 2 years, about a year and a half, I would think he would want to go wherever he's going to be able to play the most and be able to kind of earn that next contract. That's what I would think. But Toronto being in the mix, I know they've got concerns with Hakanpää long term completely different type of defenseman, mind you. They've been having power play issues. I mean, when Klingberg was in his prime, I mean, that's what he was. It was an offensive defenseman. And when he was signed originally by the Leafs, that's kind of what they had in mind for him being able to help out with that and be another offensive threat. The problem, I think, in Toronto, which we'll talk about here, is Morgan Riley, I think, has had too much on him. He's a good defenseman, but I think they'd be a way better team if he was slotted differently. So we'll see what happens with Klingberg, but the Leafs, Sens, and Oilers are apparently the main teams in the mix right now, with Toronto having a bit of an edge where he already played with that organization recently and already living in the area doing his rehab. So we will see. Should be interesting. It's definitely risky, but if he is anything like Patrick Kane, and I know he's not going to be Patrick Kane, but if his recovery goes as well as his and he gets back to playing like closer to what he was, maybe not in his prime, but closer to his prime than more recently, he could be a real good, free, without giving up assets type of addition. So we'll see what happens. But an interesting name that we're going to have to watch here, probably over the next, I would say 7 to 10, maybe up 7 to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at most before he signs and is in a spot to play. Now, when it comes to some trade talk, we're going to look at Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. I know one thing I want to talk about with the Leafs was about their blue line. We hear a lot about them wanting to add a center, and that definitely, based on comments we've heard from Brad Treliving and many NHL insiders, it appears to be that the center spot, and they're open to getting a number 2 or 3 center. It kind of depends. I think they're probably leaning more towards somebody who is more of a really good 200-foot player, so a good two-way guy, so probably somebody who slots as a 3. The price tag won't be quite so high, but of course they can juggle their lines around. Either Tavares can move to the wing, or maybe they play behind Tavares as a 3C. Like, there's, depending on who they kind of zone in on here, will determine how they slot in the lineup. But there's options. At the end of the day, the depth is just not as strong at that position as they would like. So clearly that is something that's been discussed. Now, Dave Pagnotta mentioned some names that the Leafs are, at least expected to be either already have or expected to be looking at. One was Brock Nelson with the New York Islanders. We've heard that before, but I think it's going to be a big asking price. Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders are reportedly looking for a first-round pick. We've heard that Brad Treliving is a bit reluctant, at least right now, to give that up in a deadline deal for a rental. So we'll see about that. Nelson would be a real good fit. He knows Tavares well, which is, not a huge deal, but helps a little bit. A good 30-goal scoring centerman, good size. I think Brock Nelson more than likely ends up with a team like Minnesota. Myself, I think that's a better fit for him. Bill Guerin loves him, we know. Put him on the Four-Nation team for USA. It's his home state. I think, and there's a better chance that they could re-sign him and keep him there. That's just what my gut feeling says about Brock Nelson. I don't know if the Leafs are going to want to pay that big of a price. Another name that was brought up, though, by Pagnotta that he feels that they could look at is Montreal Canadiens centerman Christian Dvorak. Now, Dvorak is a name that Montreal definitely would like to move on. He's not expected to re-sign. We know the Habs could retain money on his contract. And, if Dvorak is slotted properly as a 3, could we see these two, original 6 teams make a deal? Now, it's probably going to depend a little bit as well. For one, we don't know if Dvorak is their preferred target. I would suspect the price on Dvorak wouldn't be overly high. He's probably a player that they would get a lot cheaper. But is he... Can they do better than that? Is going to be the big question, right? And the other thing with Montreal right now, they're probably, I think there's definitely a few pending UFAs they would move regardless of their spot in the standings. I think guys like Dvorak or Armia, I think if they can get a deal for them, I think they would move them regardless because they're not coming back next year. Now, Jake Evans, David Savard, a little bit more critical to this team. If they think they can get in the playoffs, I can understand why they may be reluctant to trade them and make the team weaker. But they also have to think about the future. Yes, you might be able to squeak into the playoffs, but the old expression, get in and see what happens, anything can happen, you never know, which is true. But, I don't know. It's risky giving up, something that when you could be getting good assets in return. So I don't know what Montreal is going to do there, but it sure would be interesting. We rarely see trades between the Leafs and the Habs, but Dufour might be a name for the Leafs to keep an eye on. We'll see how he plays, especially over the next few weeks. And, they probably don't like his contract, but they might like it at 50% retained. And, it's something that to keep an eye on. Now, it doesn't mean for sure that's the way they're going to go. That's just one of the names that David Pagnotta is keeping an eye on for Toronto and what they're looking for. Now, Carla Koliakova, former Maple Leaf defenseman and analyst for TSN, who has his own show in the mornings called First Up, was talking about the power play and the fact that for a team with all this talent, why can't they get the power play to work more consistently? It's been an issue in the playoffs as well. The power play is not always consistent, and the offense tends to dry up. And it just seems like a lot of times they're not getting the offense from the back end. That Morgan Rielly, as much as he's a beloved member of that locker room, I think the fan base really likes him. Likeable guy, good player, works hard, well-liked teammate. There's lots to like there. Like, not saying that Rielly's a bad player, they should get rid of him. I've always often thought for a long time that I don't know that he's really gifted enough offensively to be a true number one. And if he were slotted differently on that team, it was more of a secondary option on the power play or a second pair, or even if he's on the top pair, but the other, his partner is more of the number one, I think he slotted differently. He could be even more important to the team, and they would be deeper, stronger, and better because of it. So Carlo was saying that as much as all the talk about going after a center, should they really go for an offensive defenseman who could run the power play? And you know what? Maybe John Klingberg. Is there any chance he could be that guy? I mean, I know it's a risky move given his recent injuries and how things went before, but is it something that we could look at? I don't know. I was curious to see, but I do agree with Carlo. I've been saying it for years that they need a more of a true number one. If Rielly's a 2 or even a 3 on that team, they're way deeper and way better because of it. So we will see what happens on that front. But it'd be interesting to see a deal between Toronto and Montreal. Pagnotta is also talking about when it comes to the Ottawa Senators. He says that the Sens are looking to make a couple of additions down the stretch. But a lot of it's going to depend on their space because their cap space is very limited. So clearly right now, the longer they wait, the more they can try to recruit a little bit more money. But, Steve Staios is very, very patient here, especially with the fact that they've got a lot of injuries and players that are not going to be out long enough that they can't, just reuse the money in LTIR. It's not going to happen. He says they're looking for a middle six winger and a depth defenseman. Well, they're possibly getting back Michael Amadio and David Perron here in not too distant future. Amadio is likely going to be back, I would say, within the next week. Perron's a little bit more questionable. He's not skating as much with the team, having a back issue, and those can be more complicated. We don't know exactly what's going on. So, but even getting Amadio back here short term would be a big help. And then on the back end, they're rumored to be in the mix on Klingberg. So I guess if they did sign him, that would probably be all they do. I don't know. But I mean, at this point, they're happy with their blue line, but they're one injury away from really having a major issue. So the depth hasn't been quite as strong as they were hoping, but the guys that have been called up have been filling in relatively well. Some talk about Chicago as well, probably looking to move guys like Taylor Hall, Ryan Donato before the deadline, getting maybe like a 3rd, 4th round pick. And I know there's been some talk where he was saying that a middle six scoring winger, that one of those guys might be a good fit for Ottawa, especially if Chicago can retain some money. So again, that could be a good fit if they are going to make that move. That could be a way for them to do it. So the other reports that we talked about yesterday, when it comes to Claude Giroux, there's no real news on an extension. If they have been talking, they've been keeping it quiet. But the belief is, as long as the team's good, he's going to want to stay and probably extend. But I don't think they're in a huge hurry to get that done. But I wouldn't expect them to be traded either, especially if they're battling for playoffs or, if they do well enough here in the next 3 or 4 weeks to kind of, really nail a spot down. But even if we're down to the last, a couple days before the deadline and they're still in the same spot they are now, like they're within a point or they're right there, I wouldn't think that they're going to sell anything off. If anything, they'll try to bring in some reinforcements to make sure they try to get in. So, obviously a little extra scoring with the way things have gone lately would be nice. One of those wingers from Chicago might be a great fit. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.